So it's nice to have you back here again. My name is Duncan Berry, and I'm recording some conversations with people around the town of Harwich who can shed light on our heritage and our lineage and our hopefully our futurity. And this morning I have with uh, in the studio Mrs. Jane Tadabouette, who is a marvelous resource in town, raconteuse, and a formidable person in business. And Jane actually, I can't figure out whether she's more my father's younger sister or my older sister, but um, her connections to my family go back way back to when I think my grandparents were empty nesters. And so it's great to have you here. Thank you for coming in this morning.
It's a pleasure. Thank you, Duncan.
Great. So I wanted to ask you first, we both share this bug about Harwich history and the families and the genealogies, and what activated your interest in this?
Well, I've always been interested in history since I was a child, a very young child, actually. And my parents, on my mother's side, I am all Pilgrim, and they settled all on Cape Cod.
Uh-huh.
And as a child, although I was born in Salem, I often was here and visiting my mother's great aunts, great uncles, grandparents, and so forth and so on. And this just became the center of my away from home life
Right.
and visiting relatives and being here. And eventually, when I was still a young child, my parents bought some uh, rental houses. Uh, they were both teachers on the North Shore, and they built rental houses with the idea that they could, as an investment, and eventually have an inn here when they retired from teaching, which indeed they did. And so by the time I was a teenager, we were my parents had an inn in West Harwich on Shore Road. And so that was the beginning of my actual living in Harwich, although I had spent many time with cousins, close and distant, including Duncan's grandparents.
Right, that's right.
They would babysit for me when my parents were doing other things in the afternoon. And I sat with them on their porch, I well remember. And
I should tell you, we still enjoy that porch. There's a lot more traffic now on 28, but
Right.
the porch is still a great
Well,
spot.
it was a lovely spot on a summer afternoon or a spring afternoon or a weekend when my parents would be on the Cape. And I got to know them, and then all these many years later, managed to cross paths with Duncan.
Yeah, that's great.
At any rate, so Shore Road, West Harwich became part of my life, and my mother, being very interested in history, rekindled her relations in Harwich, including her grandfather, Nehemiah Doane Kelly, on Riverside Drive in West Harwich. He was a captain, and he had owned and run the sail loft that did the ships for his uncle, who was Job Chase.
Right.
And so I became interested in all of these people. And as time went on, I graduated from Cornell. And summers, I worked on the Cape at the old Chase House. And of course, then I got to know the house really well.
This is the Job Chase Jr. House that is probably popularly known as the Irish Pub.
Right, exactly. This is pre-Irish pub.
Pre-Irish Pub. And you'll share with us who your favorite or the most famous customer at the Chase House.
Oh, President Kennedy and his wife Jacqueline loved to come there, and they started coming there actually. I'm not sure if they were dating or early married, but they came to the old Chase House, and then they came when he was president a couple of times. And of course, he became our favorite customer. But it was lovely. The dining room of the Chase House overlooked the Herring River just before it crosses the bridge, and it was a lovely view out on the upwaters of the Herring River in the north direction. And they loved a table there. There was a nice table for two that was saved should ever they return, and when they did in time. So, and at that time, along Captain's Row, which Duncan has made a very special place in Harwich, created, well,
I've dusted it off.
Dusted it off is a good word. It gathered the whole area and taught us all a lot about it. We're sea captains who originally, and at that era when the houses were built, and my Captain Nehemiah Doan Kelly on Riverside Drive was among that generation
Right.
of sea captains. And so I learned more and more about the different captains. And in life in Hawaii, believe it or not, I ran into captains, but I should preface this by saying when I graduated from Cornell, having worked summers on the Cape and had some good opportunities, I was hired by Hilton International Hotels to go to open the Kahala Hilton in Honolulu, which was the first of their international hotels.
Wow.
And I was sent out there one March day from Cape Cod, and the rest is history because I met my husband there and we stayed there. However, the Cape Cod sand was in my blood.
Right.
Because we owned property here. The first house we bought here, we were first married and living in an apartment in Honolulu when we bought a house in Harwich Port.
Right now, I really want to talk about that house.
So that house was our first house, and I'll be, so you've got the preface. And that house, I had heard that it was a parsonage from North Harwich. It was the Baptist parsonage in North Harwich. And that the old folks at that time, and I'm talking about 1970, the old folks then all told me for sure they knew all about that house. Up and down the town, they knew about it. And it was for sale for a while, and it was about to be burned down. The Harwich Fire Department was on the corner. It is still on the corner of Lower County Road and Ocean Avenue. And it was let go.
It's the kind of duplex with the long porch out front.
It's got a long porch.
Two doors.
Two front doors.
Low slung and a very handsome, well-proportioned building.
A handsome, well-proportioned building. It had been kept up in as much as it had a good roof and it was in good condition inside, but no one had really lived in it except summers. The family had dwindled down,
right.
And there were really no heirs. And so the final lady who owned it had it on the market. She was getting elderly herself, and she taught school on the North Shore. And she didn't want to come to the Cape anymore. And it had only still in 1970, it had a full outhouse. And the kitchen was a full historic kitchen.
With the cast iron pump.
With the cast iron
water pump.
Sink pump.
That's what we had as kids. I feel like I grew up in part of the 19th century, part of the 20th century,
right.
You know.
And it had a summer kitchen out in the back. And nothing had been done to it. It was like a moment in time that was preserved. And I fell in love with it. We walked in the door and said, we'll buy it.
Great.
And so here we were with a house that needed badly to be updated.
Right.
In Harwich and living in an apartment in Hawaii. And then 2 children came and they were at that house with us. So I restored the house and kept everything as it was, only we put in modern conveniences like a full bathroom.
Right.
And 2 bathrooms, actually. Put one upstairs and one down. And upstairs we put it next to the chimney and called it the chimney suite because the roof was highest at that point. Where the chimney went up, we could put a shower right against the chimney. It's interesting to restore an old house. So it was dated about 1790 by everybody who looked at it and by the records of what was going on with the church situation. So I learned a lot about the North Harwich church situation, which was actually part of the origins of the town.
Right.
And that was the basis of the town in early days was in North Harwich.
Right.
And it was only as the population became more mariners that they moved to the south part of the town, because normally the people wanted to be away from the ocean.
Right.
But they wanted to then, when the mariners and the captains built their homes along Captain's Row, the population had shifted and the churches shifted likewise.
Right. And the Baptists, too, they were a breakaway from the Congos.
That's right.
In Harwich Center. So there was a kind of a political thing, and then a breakaway from what's now Brewster. So there's a kind of a lot of turbulence and churn in Harwich politics and theology and industry. It's a fascinating time.
Well,
I do want to ask you, though, particularly because I've enjoyed your descriptions of it before, but the layout of the house has a special meaning for the function
Oh,
as a parsonage.
exactly. So as Duncan described, it has two front doors, and everyone has always wondered, of course, why does it have, and two identical in appearance. It's not like one is a fancier door and one is a simpler door. They're finished off the same way, the same size, same entrance from the street. They're some 25 feet apart, at a guess. And one you go in, and it's a normal entrance that you'd expect inside the front door. It has a lovely stairway to the second floor, not fancy, but
Would
very
this be on
appropriate.
the right side, the
This is the
western?
left door.
So
as you
the
face it.
eastern left door. Okay, right.
The eastern left door, and that has a hall, and then from the straight down the hall is a bedroom, and then there was another bedroom beside it. There were two bedrooms at that back portion of the house. But the most important thing is that to the right of the door immediately was the formal parlor.
Right.
And this was the minister's entrance for the door for the members of the church who wanted to call on him. In other words, his official door.
So his ministry was conducted in that front parlor then.
And in that front parlor, what was really unusual, unfortunate, a future owner of the house removed it, but it had the biggest sliding door, pocket doors I've ever seen.
Really?
And they were, I would say, solid oak. They might have been pine, but they were extremely heavy.
So that would have been a later edition, probably a Victorian kind
No, it was
1790s. You think they? Well,
no,
maybe
not
so.
well. It seemed to be in there because the whole thing was kind of worked around that. I mean, I had people.
Well, we
come
can't
and
look at it now, though, right?
It's gone.
Yeah, it's gone.
But the thing about it was, and the reason it was built was so that those doors could be pulled and the room could become private.
Right.
And it wasn't a normal door which swung on a hinge. They were doors which came from pocket doors, two doors that came together. And they were heavy so the sound wouldn't travel. And the room was a large, comfortable room. And that was where he could meet with his parishioners and meetings with church folks and all that they did in those days, which were many meetings about issues. They discussed things in those days a lot.
Well, if anybody's familiar with the Dennis Public Records, the Dennis Historical Society published Dennis Public Records with Ruth and Ruth Derrick, I think, did most of the legwork on that. But the last 150 pages or so are the church records of the Baptist Church beginning in, I think, 1777. So they begin, it's 20 years after the founding of the church.
Right.
When Richard Chase, cousin of Job, set it up, and he was kind of a wild man.
Yes.
And they ran him out on a rail, and his wife was actually my first cousin, Thankfulberry.
Right.
And so what I find to be so interesting about that building and that kind of, we know that the church ended up moving down to West Harwich at the head of West Depot and across from Belmont.
And just let me tell you, though, quickly about the other door.
Oh, yeah. Okay. All right.
The other door, as I say, identical from the outside, but when you opened the door, it was a back hallway with a captain's stairway.
Right.
And that was all that was there. It was just a small hall with a captain's stairway, a door into what was the family's keeping room, I would say. That's where the fireplaces were and we called it the dining room.
Right.
And the stairway, captain's stairway, went straight up to the attic of the second floor, which is where we put the bathroom on the second floor against the chimney. And then if you went back east on the second floor in the house, there was a bedroom, and then went through a bedroom to get to another bedroom, as is in the old houses. And the further bedroom was at the top of the stairway from the other door. So the parts of the house were totally separated. In other words, the minister was able to have his own area.
Right.
Totally.
Public and private domains.
Public area. But then when it was just family time or whatever, he could open the doors and the whole house would be available to the family. But the children, obviously, as they grew up, came and went through the right-hand door. That was the family entrance.
Right.
And and the house was very unique in that regard, and I've never seen one quite like it. I've
Right.
seen variations of it, but not that the house was so divided and nothing touched when we bought it. It was still original.
So there's a comparable duplex on Willow that's dated about 1770 to 1790. Worth taking a look at it. For a while, it was, I believe, it was painted purple, kind of a little lurid for colonial tastes,
Right.
but it was still kind of fascinating. So, but what's interesting to me is here's that building still exists, and the primary church, the replacement for the original church building, which was in North Harwich, where the North Harwich Cemetery is at the crest of that hill, where Richard Chase and Thankful are buried at the top. And Job is also there with
Yes,
his
that's
members
right.
of his company and the Harwich militia. That church was moved to West Harwich, and thence in 1841, when they put up the new building, the current building, it was moved to Dennisport
Exactly,
on
C Street.
on C Street, or is it C
C
or
Street.
C Street and Ocean, or C Street and Cross Street,
Right,
and it was there until about 1970.
right.
And that was there, so it had this long, viable life, and it's right now. I believe it's now, it was demolished, but there's a church still on that site down in Dennisport. So it's amazing how the afterlife of that community is still part of our,
Right,
built
I mean,
fabric of the town and adjacent towns.
And the house I've just described, to end that, which we call the parsonage and always have,
Right.
is landed in hands of off-Cape people, but they take very good care of it, and
Right.
and it's in mint condition.
That's
They've
great.
added to the back. There was extra land in the back. They didn't destroy any of the look of the main house, and they
Right.
put wings on the back, which are tasteful, but you don't see them from the street, and they don't interfere with the rest of the house now.
Right.
And so we're very pleased with that addition to that.
So
small
one of
area.
the interesting things, so that would have been the parsonage as the church was up there, and I'm curious about when it was moved. I have no idea. Did you research that?
Yes, it appears to have been moved. It was moved by Doan,
Okay.
who married a Kelly, who was related to the church in North Harwich.
Right.
And at the time they were married, it seems that the Doan and through the Kelly woman's father negotiated purchasing the church, which has been understood. I haven't been able to absolutely prove it, but it's the only thing that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because I do know he moved it,
Okay.
and his wife was the one involved with it. And
Would it
he
have been
moved it,
associated or reassociated with the Pilgrim congregation down there, or would this have just been detached from the congregation, or?
No, actually, you've got it right, because actually they became involved in the Pilgrim Church. They
See,
did
because
not
the reason
become-
why I ask is because right across the street from me is the so-called Barnaby Inn, which was
Right.
run by Reverend James Barnaby, who served for almost 40 years as the minister of the West Harwich Baptist Church,
Exactly.
starting prior to its move. And then it was a stagecoach stop, and it's
Right.
had many functions over the year. Now it's, as inn and as, a destination. So it's interesting to see how this man, who I think he performed something like 2,500 weddings or marriages
Yes.
in that church over the course of his
His
service, and countless baptisms and what have you. So.
Well, the parsonage became very attached to the Pilgrim Church,
Okay.
and actually the man who hauled it to the location that it's at, he was one of Captain Nathaniel Doan's sons,
Okay. Interesting.
and he married again a Kelly.
So Captain Nathaniel is kind of the post-colonial patriarch, right, of a lot of the Doans that were in the Harwich area,
Yes.
Harwich Port and West Harwich, right?
Harwich Port and
So
West Harwich.
Valentine Doan, who was a sea captain and an enterprising character,
All
and Valentine Doan's property is the one that's right across from Dairy Queen, and it's now kind of like is that Valentine or Valentine Jr.?
Well, it's the one
was-
that became Doctor, what's his name?
Right. Right.
I used to go there to the doctor.
Yeah.
I can't think.
Yeah. I used to go to Dr. Howe's in South Yarmouth, who
Okay,
who
yes,
treated
that
my
was
dad,
also.
back in the 30s, and he was still kicking around in the 80s. So,
And the Dones then were very involved in the church, and I actually have a thing that was presented to the church to the Doan family, who were in the parsonage, and so they became very involved. And they actually there's a plaque in the back of the Pilgrim Church which shows all the Dones,
right.
including the one from the parsonage. They were founders of Pilgrim Church
Aha.
in 1854.
1852. Because I know that the Dones have been active up in the Congo Church in Harwich Center for years too. So
Yes, right.
it's an enormous family, and so you have all these Doan connections too, right? Doan and
Yes.
Kelly, and so first, let me ask: the Kelly connection were originally a branch of the family Okilia, and
Yes.
they settled in, I guess, Yarmouth and
At the headwaters of the Bass River.
headwaters of the Bass River, right? Because there's
Right.
that small
Mayfair.
Quaker, yes, on Mayfair, there's that small
Quakers. They were
Quaker
Quakers.
cemetery up there.
Yes.
And so your Kelly family, and I've got Kelly too.
You too.
And so, and Doan. And so we're like cousins many, many, many times. But tell us about, I love this business about Job Chase Jr.'s
Mother.
married life. And his mother particularly, excuse me, Job Chase Sr.'s
Married life.
married life,
Well,
yeah.
Job Chase came from a West Harwich family.
Mm-hmm.
And he,
We're talking about senior now, right?
this is senior. It's very confusing.
1738 to 1833.
For reasons unknown to us historically, they didn't distinguish themselves very much as junior and senior in
Right.
records. In the old days, people would distinguish themselves, but actually the old man lived very long life.
Right,
And so they were both alive together, working
right,
simultaneously, and they just signed everything Job Chase.
right.
So you have to look at a document very carefully to figure out which Chase.
And I have to say, Jane has collected scores of Job Chase senior / junior material, and I've had the benefit, and we co-wrote a piece on Job Jr., and that was for the Cape Cod Genealogical Society. And the record, how you can reconstruct the lives of these people from these simple transactional records is amazing.
You know, it's actually, you see, in history, of course, you have to start with knowing what you're looking at.
Right.
And Payne's book of the history of Harwich is a tremendous resource for anyone who is interested in the history of Harwich. Even if you just pick it up once in a while,
right,
and read a little few pages of it, or
it's not a page
chapter.
turner.
It's not a page.
You want to go to the index and then
right.
kind of.
You may look up the people you know, and then you
Yeah.
get through them. You get into something else, and then you learn something else. And I've referred to it so many times. It's right at hand always. And the other thing at hand now is the church history of that Derek did.
Right.
Because that has these same people
right.
in their daily actions and getting disciplined for doing this.
Yes.
They call people out very often. You find out a lot about people's lives. And so and so and so and so are arguing for sometimes years over land boundaries
right.
and over somebody's business that's interfering with somebody else's business. It's in the church records.
Or bad language, adultery.
Or speaking bad language.
I mean, if you think that we have this social media thing is new, you got to read the church records.
It's all in the church records.
The dirt is out for everybody, to see.
So all of these people are intertwined, but following the Job Chase senior line, Job Chase, they had many children. Between junior and senior, they had some 21 children, I think.
Right.
22 children. And there was some overlap in some of the ages of the children.
That's right.
Because in the old Chase house, which that's the name of the restaurant. There were older Chase houses, but the restaurant was called the Old Chase House. This is Job Jr.'s home.
Right.
And it's the one directly on the Herring River.
Right.
On the west shore of the Herring River at
right.
the bridge on Route 28. That house has in it a classroom that was for all the children of Job and Job Jr. and the grandchildren who were also overlapping. So they had their own private classroom.
Right.
And that's where they educated the children. And it seats like 25 children.
Right.
And when I was there, it was very much intact and always had been never touched. They wanted to always preserve it, so it was never made into any other kind of a room. But
Right.
it's very large in the center of the
Right.
house.
And you could tell that the Chase Senior, Job Senior, was must have been extremely fastidious about this educational element, because he consciously built a dynasty, and he was very careful about, who received what kind of property, how they would parse out his estate. And the home then became the first post office in town. And his youngest son, Job Jr., then of course receives my theory is that that land, the property on the river, was probably an early area of activity for when Senior was building his schooners, his
Yes.
15 schooners. And that was either a chandlery or some kind of a structure. And I'll bet you anything that in 1792, when Job Jr. took it over, he built out on some existing core that I'd love to go and discover if there's some
I think where the house
substructure.
is on the back of the property by the
Yeah.
by the river, by the turn there.
Yeah,
I think there was a big barn there,
right,
and it was big enough that it could have been a chandlery too.
right.
I think it was,
Interesting.
and it was very accessible. There are old pictures of it showing
Right,
not specifically being a chandlery, but being very accessible by there was parking and a way in on the
Right.
dirt. And it was Job Senior who paid for the bridge being built
right.
across the river. And
Right.
just beyond the bridge at that point is where you found the places where the ships were built.
Well, that's right. So the south side
The south side of the bridge.
of the bridge, so right
on-
across the street from right now there's a dental office over there. But if you look at low tide, I took a drone shot a number of years
Great.
ago at low tide just by accident, and it showed 5
It's
slips.
those 5 slips.
So this is where they were, were tendered and cared for, and the recaulk and tar and all the rest of the shipwright activity. And this is where so much economic activity took place
Absolutely.
of building, making cords and ropes and sails and darning and repairing, and it's just, I mean, you can see why that part of town kind of blew up, so that by the time of Captain Gus Kroll, who was sailing all over the world as a teenager prior to the Civil War, his recollection was that these Harwich mariners from that particular part of town were the first people in Japan, the first people in the Korean Peninsula.
China.
These Harwich mariners, having grown up with the movement of the tide and the Herring River, it's like there was he thought this is where all the big blue water skippers came from, because of what Job Senior had laid out and the way it was carried forth. So there's this kind of dynastic pretension with the schooling of his own children, and probably the children that were worthy and he brought on board. And
the children, his grandchildren, the children of Job Jr., actually of all of those children, and there were 10 or 11, each one of them had like 10, 11, 12 children.
right,
And the 5, I think it's 5, I may be misstating it, but I believe it was 5 that were lost at sea.
right.
5 Chase grandchildren of Job Senior, who were the children of Job Jr., were lost at sea when they were between like 18 and 25 or so, right in that age bracket. And so Job Jr. then still had his dad around the whole time of his whole adult life.
Right.
But he was a half sibling, because Job Senior had remarried. His wife died.
Here we go. Right.
And he married for his second wife, my great grandmother, and so Job and I are half related.
Yeah, half cousins or whatever.
Because Nehemiah Doane Kelly was my great grandfather, was the first cousin he was the half brother of Job Chase.
Right.
And then Nehemiah Doane Kelly Jr. So my whole family called Job Chase uncle.
Right.
And his dad, they called uncle too.
Right.
And I don't know how they knew the difference between Uncle 1 and 2, but anyway, all the letters that I have refer to it as dear uncle.
So when you go on Facebook today and you see like the relationship description, like how you're It's complicated. Forget it. This is like genuinely complicated. These colonial families and post, federal period families where, there'd be early deaths and, stillbirths and, deaths during childbirth. And, people would be bringing in their second spouse's entire family and building out these. I mean, it was amazing how resilient people were back
Very,
then.
very resilient. And also, they didn't look very far for spouses,
Right.
which also it makes it interesting because maybe we're all a little bit strange or a little bit different.
I know, right? I've heard Chase descendants say it's a miracle that we're not like completely genetically screwed up because Paul Doan last week, he talked about being born and bred on the Cape, and he goes, it's actually more like born inbred.
I like that. That describes it.
Anyway,
Yeah.
I think we're kind of at the end of our chronological rope here. Perhaps we can continue this at a second time.
Yes.
Would that be okay?
But Harwich is an absolutely wonderful place, and it's wonderful to be here again. We've retired from Hawaii, and we've come to Harwich to live. And it's a joy to be absolutely part of this town and discovering new corners of history,
Right.
and then developing those yet again.
Yeah.
And so I'm here in
Well, we're thrilled to have you, and I'm thrilled to be in the same time zone even, because
Right.
for years it was 6 hours or
to
whatever.
talk on the phone. We had
Yes.
to plan that. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. We'll see you again and look forward to our next conversation, and thank you for joining us.